at AAA. I want to talk a little bit about Chad Gable. He made some news with it. I don't know if you've kept up with it, but man, Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez have become convinced that Chad Gable may actually be one of, if not the best wrestler in the world right now. Just on an absolute another the real story from Chad Gable this week. He talked about having a breakthrough recently thanks to The Undertaker. Here's what he had to say. I had all these little breakthroughs all along, and you can be this far into your career and still all of a sudden just realize things. It's wild about that. And Undertaker, I think, is responsible for a lot of that because he was helping out down in Mexico, what we're doing down there. And he's the one who finally got through to me. Like the idea of just stop thinking so much and just treat it as if everything you're doing is real. As if you're going out for an amateur wrestling match, take that mentality into the fight. And when it worked and when it clicked, I was like, this is so great. It makes it so easy. You don't have to think about a thing. You can just go out and do your thing and live in the moment. And like I said, that was just a month ago when I came to that realization. So it's crazy. This is a really big statement from Chad Gable, and I love that he's sharing this. I feel like a lot of times people want to play this sort of stuff close to the vest, especially when you've had so much success like Gable has. You want to act like, yeah, I was doing this all along. But to be able to say, no, I had an old-timer, if you will, respectfully to The Undertaker, put a little nugget in my brain, and like a switch flipped. And now everyone in the business has noticed it. What a great story this is, John.
Yeah, and I love the fact that everybody's coming around to what I said the day after the show. I've thought Chad was the best wrestler in the world for some time, or at least one of them. And look, it's a huge difference. And I know I was in one of the creative meetings. We were talking about Chad Gable. And Chad's a fantastic athlete. He's very smart. He's a lot like Kurt Angle. I mean, these guys who can do comedy, who can do all this different stuff. He can do all that. But the one thing we discussed was, look, it's easy when you're in the Alpha Academy, whatever the little gimmick skit thing he was in, to get heat as in, okay, we're going to do something campy and get booed. That's pretty easy to do. As to go down to Mexico and get real heat where people want to kill you when you're coming out of an arena, that's not even the same business. And Chad, when he came down there, he figured it out. I'm telling you, I've told the story before. When he had the first match with La Parka, that was the first time I saw this guy has got it figured out. He worked a heel match where he worked the leg, and finally goes over. It was a fantastic match, one of the best I'd ever seen him work. Then he comes back and he's the maestro for this mass versus mass match, which I thought was just absolutely fantastic. But you look at Chad just orchestrating every single thing around him. It's unbelievable. It's incredible what he's doing. And yeah, I think Undertaker is a big part of that, but and so is Jeremy Borash, realizing what you need to tell him to let him do it. But he still has to do it. Undertaker could have told 100 different wrestlers the same thing. 99 of them couldn't have did what Chad Gable did. It takes the two of those guys to be able to do that.
So happy for his success. Can't wait to see what the rest of his year looks like because it feels like it's really getting cranked up. He's going to be.
By the way, Conrad, I'm sorry to cut you off, but the other thing that you mentioned was WWE trying to figure out what to do with him. Conrad, that's exactly what me and you talked about a month ago, whenever it was. The same thing happened with Stone Cold. All of a sudden he does this Austin 316. They weren't planning on using him that much. They didn't have something for him. He was kind of a fill-in to get in there. And, the story's been told many times. They're punishing Triple H. And all of a sudden Austin gets put in that spot. You had this incredible promo that's cut on the fly because Michael Hayes had buzzed him, say, hey, Jake Roberts just cut a religious promo on you. And all of a sudden Steve goes out there and cuts this promo. And all of a sudden now you got this really hot commodity. We didn't have plans for him. So it takes a while to figure out, okay, wait a minute, we got to figure out what to do. And you don't want to take a misstep. So you don't want to put, like, say, Stone Cold back in the day and something out there and, douse the fire that's starting to burn. The same thing with Chad. All of a sudden they end up with this freaking commodity that's just unbelievable. You don't want to do something. You don't want to misstep. You don't want to put them out there and do something that kills that fire. You want to do something that'll build it. So I think they'll figure it out. I mean, they've got an unbelievable commodity here. They figured it out with Steve. And, Steve all of a sudden becomes this guy that any building in the world you put his name on, he's sold it out. I mean, does Chad get to that level? No, look, I have no idea. There are only about one or two people in the history of the business have gotten to that level. But are they going to find something for him? Sometimes it takes a while when a gift is thrown into your lap to figure out what to do with it.
Well, they figured out what to do with him for SummerSlam. It's going to be Chad Gable and Penta for the Intercontinental title at SummerSlam. Penta has been really, really featured prominently for a long, long time. You could see that even in Unreal. We saw the behind the scenes of Paul Heyman bragging on him. This feels like that could have been a main event of a pay per view. And now it's just a part of SummerSlam. This SummerSlam card is looking pretty ridiculous. They're calling you right now about SummerSlam.
That's right. That's right. They're calling me right now.
What would you do? I know we're going to do a SummerSlam preview show, but Penta's obviously established to the Raw audience, to the mainstream roster. I know there's been a lot of stops and starts with Chad Gable. He's coming off what a lot of people, yourself included, said it's the greatest match you've ever called. Some people have even suggested it might be the best match in WWE history. And think about all that encompasses. I mean, that's a lot of coverage.
With Walmart Summer Style, you can leave quite an impression.
It's all from Walmart. So is my dress. Who knew?
Summer just got a whole lot sweeter.
About all that encompasses. I mean, that's a lot of coverage. Would you put the trigger? Is it time to pull the trigger on Chad Gable? Do you put the Intercontinental title on him?
Yes.
Or do you do a different story for Chad?
No, I would. If that's where you're going with him, yeah, I'd put the title on him. Not any doubt in my mind, unless they have some idea of where they want to go with him next. Sometimes the route to get there is not. You got to be careful not to book like a fan. I always say if you want to kill a territory, let the fans book it. Because you'd have the governor in Walking Dead. If it's up to me, because I watch Walking Dead, I want him dead now. I don't want him to get killed in that first episode. But instead, I got to watch 2 seasons. And so I watch every single bit of it. Get him this week, get him this week. I know they're not going to get him this week because it's not the end of the season. I know that. I don't care. I watch it anyway. And they always used to say, it's an old saying in wrestling, if you want to kill a territory, let the fans book it, because they just put the good guys over. I don't know if this is the spot. To me, it feels like the spot where you put Chad Gable over and start this big, nice run with him. He is such an incredible worker. And guys like this only come along, once or twice a generation, that guys like this that can work like this. Chad's figured it out. Maybe that run down in Mexico with Undertaker is what got him to that next level. I don't know, but he's there. And you got to figure out now what to do with him.
The Intercontinental title is interesting to me, John, and I want to get it from your perspective. As a fan, I once used to think, well, the Intercontinental title is like one step below the world title. And a lot of times when the guy who loses the Intercontinental title, it's because he's moving on up the ladder. And I think of guys like Randy Savage, or even the Ultimate Warrior, or Shawn Michaels, or Bret Hart, and on and on. But there are sort of 2 courses. You can continue to move up or maybe go back down a little bit. What's the differentiator between having success as an Intercontinental Champion and whether or not it translates to being in the world title picture versus not? Because once upon a time, I've heard old professional wrestlers in shoot interviews say, oh, well, that was the workers' belt. And you knew you were going to get a great competitive match, but maybe they weren't necessarily selling tickets. But that's not always the case. I mean, in recent years, guys like Jey Uso and Sami Zayn, they've won the Intercontinental title and then gone on to win the world title. What will be next for Penta if that were to hypothetically happen? Could you see Penta in the world title picture, or is there another destination you think that's better suited for Penta?
No, I think the world title picture is probably where he would head. He's so popular right now. I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, everybody dressing like him. The people doing his symbols and all the things that he does. Everything. Penta's incredibly over, and so yeah, and the thing with the Intercontinental title. The Intercontinental title at times was the working man's title, but it was also at times a main event title. You would run, when you're running 2 shows a night, you'd have the Intercontinental Champion on one show, you'd have the World Championship on the other show, the WWE title on the other show. So it all depends who holds it and the storyline that gets you to it. Sometimes it's a absolute featured title as much as the world title, and sometimes it's kind of a throwaway. We're like, you don't really pay attention to it. So it all depends on who has it and the storyline that got them there.
We should mention that, of course, I think most everybody listening to this knows there's been a bit of a regime change with WWE. So we'll talk about it in more of the Triple H era. In this era, you've seen Sami Zayn, Ricochet, Gunther, Sami Zayn, Braun Breaker, Jey Uso, Braun Breaker, Dominic Mysterio, John Cena, Dominic Mysterio, and now Penta as the champ. Penta's had the belt since March. It'll be interesting to see what they do with Penta next, because I would love to see him in an opportunity to be in the main events. And I don't know that that opportunity would have ever really been there under Vince's regime. It feels like if a guy like Nakamura came along today, maybe his WWE run would have been totally different too. Do you think that the current regime views, I guess we'll call them ESL, English Second Language Talent, differently than maybe Vince did?
Yeah, maybe. It's tough because you got to be able to cut promos. And before Conrad, so much of our revenue was dependent upon North American. I mean, specifically up from Mexico, from the Rio Grande up. Our pay per view buys was the biggest things almost that we had. But now your TV revenue is worldwide. It's truly global. And that's why you can have, PLE pay-per-views now called PLEs in different countries, because it's all streaming. So it doesn't matter the revenue. You don't have to worry about people buying pay-per-views in North America and specifically U.S. and Canada to get the main revenue out of your company. Now the revenue is already there because of streaming. So I think it's not Vince. I think it's the idea of where you're getting your revenue from has changed.